Picture this. You're about to step on a stage. The room is buzzing. The sea of faces stares back at you, waiting for something, anything, to grab their attention. Then, with a smile on your face, you mention something, and suddenly, from that moment forward, everyone is hooked onto everything you say. Wouldn't that be great? Well, guess what? That's easier than most people realize. Hi, I'm James I. Bond, one of America's leading behavioral management specialists. And today we're diving into 7 simple ways to start your motivational talk with a bang. In the next few minutes, you'll discover a simple way to use the most powerful human interaction tool that exists. How making your audience laugh can get them hooked onto you and what you're talking about. How adding brain triggers, activity, and storytelling can wake up their brains, and more. Whether you're inspiring a team, igniting a movement, or just trying to make sure Uncle Bob stays awake at your wedding toast, these tips are for you. Okay, let's go. For starters, when you say something that activates your listener's brain, that can be the most important tool you start with. So think about this. What's the most powerful tool of human interaction? I'm using it now, aren't I? Can you tell what I'm doing? What am I doing? That's right. I'm using questions, aren't I? Questions are the most powerful tool of human interaction. It's wired into our brains. Think about it. Whenever someone asks us a question, we need to answer it, don't we? So, whenever you're giving a motivational speech, the number one tool is to start with a question. Questions are like caffeine for the brain. For example, imagine you're talking to entrepreneurs. You could say, how many of you have thought about giving up on your business, but something inside said, not yet? Raise your hands. A question like this that gets an interesting response can be a powerful way to start your talk. But there is something else that you might also want to consider. There's a surprisingly powerful communication tool that could boost the interactivity you have with your audience even more. It's called simple reflexive questions, and it's something you add to many of the statements you make. Isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree? Are simple reflexive questions, aren't they? You add them to the end of your statements, and suddenly you can tell if whatever you're saying is resonating with your audience. Does that make sense? I was talking to 1,200 entrepreneurs and small business owners in training I ran for the U.S. Small Business Administration. Instead of saying, boosting your profits can be tougher than most people realize, I instead said, boosting your profits can be tougher than most people realize. Isn't that true? And watched the positive expressions on everyone's faces that showed me that they were in sync with what I was saying. Does that make sense? So getting yourself used to adding, isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, and don't you agree to the end of many of the statements you make can give you an almost magical ability to keep your audience deeply engaged with what you're saying. Does that make sense? Okay, here's number 2. Use humor in your motivational talks. Investor Warren Buffett explained, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. He was basically explaining how only when times get tough do you discover who's truly capable and competent. But using this somewhat humorous metaphor made what he was saying resonate with thousands of investors. Of course, you don't always need humor, and in some topics, humor is basically not appropriate. However, whenever you can, humor can be incredibly valuable. And here's why. Humor triggers oxytocin in the bloodstream. Psychologically, oxytocin makes people more receptive to whatever you're explaining, which is why it can help you get people to connect with you as a speaker and with what you're saying. Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill was highly memorable with the help of humorous phrases like this. Lady Astor famously remarked, if I were married to you, I'd put poison in your coffee, with Churchill responding, if I were married to you, I'd drink it. See how this humor grabs your attention and makes Churchill even more memorable? How about cartoonist Charles M. Schulz's quote, all you need is love, but a little chocolate now and then doesn't hurt. And author Oscar Wilde's, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. Now, these humorous quotes make the speakers and their quotes resonate even more with their fans. Now, since laughers are buyers, including humor in your motivational talk can help whatever you're saying resonate easier with the audience you're trying to win over. Okay, here's number three in tools that will boost your motivational speeches using brain triggers. Ever hear phrases like this? Have an attitude of gratitude. The riches are in the niches. Facts tell, but stories sell. Attract the best and repel the rest. Now, these are phrases speakers created using brain triggers like rhyme, chiasmus, and alliteration to strengthen their quotes while making them stand out as speakers. Now, think of Zig Ziglar, who became famous as a motivational speaker in a large part because of quotes like this. We all need a daily checkup from the neck up to avoid stinkin' thinking, which can ultimately lead to a hardening of the attitudes. Snoop Dogg's slang phrase, faux shizzle my nizzle, meaning for sure, my friend, helped boost him to even greater fame. Now, many of the world's most famous speakers also use chiasmus, the flipping of a phrase, like all for one and one for all, or President John F. Kennedy's ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And civil rights activist Malcolm X's we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us. And when you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Combining chiasmus with humor makes phrases like these stand out even more. Good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere. And I'd rather wake up and pee than pee and wake up. Then there's alliteration, the repetition of sound, like your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. And prior planning prevents poor performance. Prior planning prevents poor performance. By the way, if identifying and using brain triggers like these is interesting, you might want to check out my book, Brain Glue, that shows you how to light the fire of desire in your buyer with 14 brain triggers like the ones I just showed you. You can check it out at yesbrainglue.com. Okay, here's number four. Add an activity. Activities are like stretching before a workout. They get your blood flowing. Now try a quick breathing exercise or even something quirky like asking everyone to give their neighbor a high five. Of course, you get bonus points if what you ask for ties into your message. On a Zoom call, online speakers will often ask attendees to enter a yes or no in the chat box. Have you ever noticed that? Well, when selling something, statistics show that getting attendees to take some kind of action during your call, like answering yes or no, can make it easier to get more of them to buy whatever you're trying to sell. Okay, number five, tell a story. Storytelling. You can go historical, like, did you know Abraham Lincoln lost 8 elections before becoming president? Or you can go personal. Let me tell you about the time I turned my kitchen into a scientific experiment trying to make gluten-free bread. Now, stories make you relatable, and relatability makes you memorable. Okay, now number six, quote a study. Nothing says I know my stuff better than a solid statistic with a valid source. Listing that helps listeners feel confident about what you're telling them. But here's something important to remember. Whenever you give a statistic, make sure you also provide a perspective. For example, if I say Americans discard 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour, sounds like a lot, but how much is that? If I then say that's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks, that makes the stat a lot more relatable and therefore a lot more persuasive. Now, I remember the US government gave $100 billion to Ukraine in the war with Russia. Now, about a week after they gave them the $100 billion, they said that half that money was unaccounted for, meaning they have no idea what happened to it. Wow, that's $50 billion and no one knows what happened to it? So, how much is $50 billion? Most people don't realize that $1 billion is 1,000 times $1 million. That's so much that instead of losing that money, the US government could have given $50,000 to 1 million Americans. 1 million Americans. See how adding perspective helps make statistics easier to understand? Okay, and last but not least is number 7, surprise your audience. So, lastly, keep your audience on their toes by saying something unexpected, like, I'm not here to motivate you, I'm here to challenge you. Or, how about doing something quirky, like starting your talk by juggling? Okay, maybe that doesn't work if you're as bad as I am at juggling. I'm not good at juggling at all. But the point is, stand out. When you break the mold, people remember. Okay, so there you have it. 7 strategies to grab your audience's attention right from the start of your talk. Whether you're asking a question, leading an activity, telling a story, quoting a study, or throwing a curveball or juggling, the key is to know your audience and make your talk about them. So now that you have these 7 tools, go out there and captivate the room and make your mark. And you might also want to check out my Brain Glue book to see how brain triggers can really help you. Check it out at yesbrainglue.com. And hey, if this video gave you a spark of inspiration, hit that subscribe button and subscribe for more tips on owning the stage. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and stay motivated.